Me?
Yeah.
No, mine's just spears. Hello. We're getting set up.
We're almost ready. Happy Australia Day. We'll be ready in moments. Wave, Australians. See, we celebrate Australia Day with real Australians. Wave. There they are. Chukas.
Look at Travis' hat.
I know, I got a haircut too. Just
Did
for
you go
this.
to the bathroom?
No, I'm gonna go right now. Is it recording?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Rick, show your hat. Come closer. Right here. Oh yeah, we have a flag.
Ta-da!
Goodbye. Rick is assisting today. Oh, the TV's on. I'll turn that off.
Rick, I'm gonna have you take some rubber cement later too. You can just take a table and do it in the hallway. If anybody bitches about this now, they can rubber off.
That's better.
I think we're ready. We're ready.
Can you guys hear us
Wait, I'm not plugged in.
and see you?
Can you hear me? Somebody
Type in a little questions area.
Somebody let Rachel know. Yeah, and a bunch of folks are new today because this is kind of something different than tutu making and patterning. Hi. You've got a little menu bar on the side, and we keep everybody muted. But you can type your questions. Otherwise, it's total chaos. And also, everybody gets the recording of this with it. The link will probably be ready this weekend. So I may get it sent out this weekend. If not, it'll come out on Monday at the latest. But somebody who we've had before, just let us know that the audio is working. And it looks like we're only waiting for 2 people from who told me they wouldn't watch live. And it's Australia Day, so I will be wearing my Australia Day headgear until it gets bothersome. Is it bothersome that I have this hat on?
No.
No, it's good. It's good.
You need it.
So we're going to give like 2 more minutes to see if we get the 2 more people who I know should be joining. But we're going to kind of like blast through a whole bunch of different things today, so that you just like have confidence to pattern and make all sorts of weird stuff in foam. Oh, I need to grab a razor blade and an X-Acto knife. I'll be right back.
Louie has a bowl on too. Come here, Louie. Come here, show your bowl. Here's his bowl.
Sharp. Rock paper. Okay, should we start? Is it starting time? Okay, folks, we're ready to get rolling here. We're gonna cover a lot.
In our shop.
I don't know. It's big-ish. I think it's like 1,000 and a little bit. Isn't it like 1,200?
Yeah, I think.
I think it's 1,200 square feet with the bathroom, which was the selling point. Okay, so should I start? I'm gonna just we're gonna show you some pictures and then show you some items and then look at some different products and things. This is aluminum foil. And then we're going to, the main part of this class is showing you how we pattern this stuff. And then we're going to just show some other little things here and there. And we're going to do it kind of like Julia Child style, where we're going to make some like parts of stuff and show you just all the different steps, and then answer questions as we go. So, and actually, I'm going to grab, will you grab me that on the top? Do you see that underneath the X box, that pile right there where your hand is? Yeah, that's a good pile to start with. So first, let's kind of talk about the patterning for how we end up with weird, unique shapes that are large, that, you know, aren't just like out of a pattern drafting book. So we're going to just show you some pictures first, and I'll tell you what's in the pictures. So we're going to share the computer screen. There's Madonna. Hey, Madonna. Give us 1 second. We're going to share the computer screen. Yeah, Rachel's going to turn me off.
Don't look at them now.
Can they hear? Can they hear you? Can they hear me?
They can hear you.
Oh, you can hear me. So this is a little dolphin, and she started out in clay. So see if you can find the clay picture of her. And we're just gonna like, manatee. Oh yeah, let's look at the manatee. So here's a little kid's manatee costume. So we start with little drawing mannequins, and it doesn't matter what size. It's easier for us to work small, and we build them up with tin foil, and then we put on top of the tin foil clay so that we can kind of soften our shape. But you don't have to get like perfectly smooth. You can show a couple more manatee ones. Then we kind of use our brain to figure out where we want seams. So putting seams over curves will help have more curve to it. So the more cuts you have over a curve, the better representation of the curve you'll have. And then there's the little dolphin. Then before we cut it apart, so we kind of draw in the basic lines, like here's where we can imagine it needs to be cut. Then we put in some reference points. You see those A, B, C, D? That's to help us figure out how to put it together better. Then from there, when we peel our latex off of the clay, then if the latex doesn't lay flat on the table, it means that we need to slice in a dart somewhere or add another seam. So just show the dolphin done up there, and then we'll look at the little videos. So you can see we went from that tiny thing, and we're going to show you how to go from the big thing. And you'll see like on the back of the dolphin's head, there's darts that we cut in that weren't in our original line, but to get the head to start to curve, we actually needed some more shape. So by opening the darts, we were able to get more shape. So show the sides, yeah. So you can just see, here's the guts, not covered in fabric. Covering it in fabric's the easy part. Now let's look at the little videos. So these were some dolphins and manatees. Just show all these. So here's just our little manatee kids shaking their butts at a dress rehearsal. So there they are. I don't know if they have audio, but they don't need it. They're talking about like what's going on, and some pelicans in the back. Those pelicans' heads are just soft upholstery foam. Then here's some cute little dolphins being wrangled in the hallway. You know, I'm telling them, get out of the way of the door, you're going to get smashed. Then you'll see in the Lycra, we don't have as many seams as we do in the foam because the Lycra is flexible. There's Clara getting the manatees out of the way, or the dolphins out of the way. So if you're stretching Lycra over the rigid foam, you can cut out some of the seams because the Lycra will shape itself. And the Lycra here is actually a smidge smaller than the foam to keep it really, really taut. This was just the funniest conversation. Does the audio play? Oh, I'm telling these kids to act natural, and this poor little girl doesn't know what that means. Neither does Chardonnay behind her. That's Liz and Chardonnay. And then a gentleman walks by who's playing a giant tree, and Chardonnay says, "Are you a boy?" And then I'm like, you guys, this was so awkward. You ruined my video moment. And then the little girl in the front just continues to look down the hallway for a half an hour. So these were this is what the dolphins turned into. Here's an easier shape. These were just turtle shells. So the fronts were just a flat piece of foam and the backs had just 2 darts. But we did the same thing. We made just the generic shape in clay first, tiny, and then made it big. And then this, here's what's going on here. They didn't know what size of kids were going to do the dolphins first. So we just blew it up to make a size. Then what I did in this fitting, this poor girl thought she was coming to get a tutu. Here what I did is I measured how long that piece was in the center front. I measured how long was it on her in this way too small one. Then I figured out how long did we want it to be, and using a proportion dial, which we'll also show you, then we were able to enlarge it for all of the other sizes. So I think that's it for the screen share. So now we'll go back to the webcam. Excellent. And let me just kind of show you. So we showed you the little miniature dolphins in clay, and they're made just on one of these like little drawing mannequins, and we build it up with tin foil and tape, and I'll mess with that in a second. Rick, would you grab me Scotch tape? Would be great. So from there, so we're gonna kind of build one up from there, then we're gonna paint it with a layer of liquid latex, and there's all different kinds of this stuff that you can get. Some of it's runnier, some of it's thicker. It just depends on the application. This is actually kind of the runny brand. But we used to paint like 6 layers of latex on our clay before we cut it apart. Now we just paint 1 layer and stick paper towels on it and paint it again so that it's thicker, like paper mache. And then that way when we're cutting our little miniature thing apart, it doesn't tear so bad, because we used to deal with the latex sticking to itself and tearing. But now that we've added paper towels, it's much easier. So let's look at the dolphin. I have a million things on my table here. Let's kind of look at where we went from the little clay mold. So this is the dolphin that we cut from clay. So we had our miniature dress form covered in clay with a shell, and then we painted it with latex and paper towels and drew on our little tiny things. And if you can see here, actually, if I take a Sharpie, you'll see I'm drawing in some darts. The original head from our original seams. So here are these 2 darts by where my finger is and this little one up by the nose. The original head wouldn't lay flat in the latex on the paper. So that meant that we weren't done giving it shape. So we sliced into it. We cut into the latex to open a dart that will later close to make the curve in the head. Now you can get as detailed as you want with this stuff. Had we split a 3rd dart, the more darts you add, the less angular stuff is. So if you go back when you get the recording and look at the dolphin originally, the back of the head kind of has a couple planes in it. But we wanted to be able to put these together quick since we were making a bunch of them on a moderate budget, you know, so that's something else to consider. So we went from that. Then the next thing that we did was, would you snag me there's a ruler or a tape measure. Grab me a tape measure. So now imagine that this is my dolphin here, right? Oh, I just broke his spine. So these things are kind of out of proportion to a human. They're a little bit fashion-y shaped rather than a human size shaped. But what we did is we just measure we just pick a point to work from, like an arbitrary thing. We can say, let's measure the out seam of the little dress form, and we know the out seam of the kid, or you can stand it back up. Or we measure the, say, neck to waist, or we measure I think what we measured on the dolphins and eventually had to measure on the kids was the neck to their seat. Like, how far was it from their neck to where we could see through the crotch, okay? So then what you do to blow it up is you take that measurement in small. So 5 inches, right, is our neck to seat. So let me just write on something. My dolphin, let's say that it was 5 inches. And I'll show you what this means here in just a minute. So if that, oh, I keep forgetting I've got my beautiful hat on. So if my neck to seat in miniature was 5 inches, or we knew the outseam, or the height of the kid versus the height of the dress form. So our original was 5. Our little one, we're going to write that down, is 5 inches. Then let's say that on our child that we measured was 19 inches. So we need to get 5 inches to 19 inches. So then we take this handy dandy tool. I'm trying to put tape right around my neck. This is called a proportion dial, which you can get on Amazon, and then use it to do reproduction and enlarge and shrink stuff at Kinko's. But what it does is it gives you the amount of enlargement, the amount to increase. So my original wheel, my 5 inches, we're going to take from the inside wheel, and we want 5 inches to end up being 19 inches. So I turn 5 all the way up to 19, and then you can either take your small thing and spend time at the photocopy place making it 375% larger, or we're going to show you how to do radial projection, which is another way to enlarge this stuff. And a couple of you here did our Leo class, so you're familiar with the radial projection, but the majority of folks today are new to it, so we are going to take a little bit of time to show you how that works. And another way you can do this is to get it flat on your paper or on multiple papers. Then you'll see here we put a 2-inch box, and what we actually did with these was we scanned this, and then we used Photoshop, or you could use Illustrator or any photo altering program. So then we scanned this and checked that our box was originally 2 inches in Photoshop, right? Then using what we figured out with our wheel, that 5 inches needs to be 19. This sounds really confusing, but it makes sense, right? It's just if it's new, it's a little odd. So if 5 inches needed to be 19 without turning the wheel, my 2-inch box needs to be 9.5. So all I did was in Photoshop, I kept evenly enlarging this image until my 2-inch line measured 9.5. Then all we did was send it to Kinko's and print it out. Or you can do it by hand. So let's look at, this is the wheel. So this is something we do too. Once we figure out the percent of a reduction or enlargement, we either tape our wheel down because we don't want it to move after that point, or we just Xerox it. So we knew that forever our dolphin, this is our dolphin enlargement. So we know what size kid this would enlarge to. So now let's say we wanted to make it for a full-size man, then we would take a new wheel and figure out how much to enlarge it for a full-size man. But before we enlarge it, let's mess a little bit on a miniature dress form. Kind of everybody's followed along so far. This is a lot today, but you'll be able to go back and visit all of this. And our goal isn't to like make a whole thing. It's just to show you all the different steps and tricks that we use. So let me play in miniature here. I'm not going to make, I'm going to make a bumblebee butt because that's an easy one to do. Is there masking tape?
Oh,
The tanny cream tape. So if I want to make a bumblebee butt, right?
Bumblebee?
A bumblebee. I mean, I think that's a good shape. If you want to make a bumblebee butt, perfect. Thank you. This sticks better to this stuff. You can start by just, I bet that sounds awful. You can start by just making your initial shape in tin foil because there's no reason to make it all with clay, right? So we're gonna just use tape and start, lay down, guy, and start taping a bumblebee butt shape. We came up with this from watching how they pattern the Macy's Day balloons. It's very similar. And actually, a lot of cars that you're driving around in were patterned this same way. Kind of wild. They sculpt the whole car in clay. Then they used to make big molds of every section of the car in clay. But now they have a machine that traces over the clay with a pointer and then re-etches it into another material. Then they pour that into some insane other material to cast it with. So let's keep making our bumblebee butt.
I can't hear me, but there's a question.
Oh yeah, there's a question.
Do you feel that the enlargement using the photocopier is more accurate than drawing by hand?
It's a little more accurate. Oh yeah, the question was, because I'm the only one with a mic. Somebody asked if it's better to just enlarge it with a copy machine or put it in Photoshop and enlarge it and have Kinko's print it. That is the most accurate, but the hand method that we'll show you, I think, works just as well. Like we'll show you this huge dragon. Actually, you want to camera the dragon? That giant dragon there, go flip the dragon so they can see it sideways. That big dragon that's hanging back there, Rachel did all in clay, and it was enlarged completely by hand, and all the pieces match back up. Oh, there it is. Now twist the dragon a little bit. So that was all done the same way in clay, and then enlarged by hand. And as long as you pay attention when you're enlarging it, you can get a pretty accurate thing. Well, this is kind of like a dinosaur bumblebee tail, but there, magic. How do you like my bumblebee tail? So then to fine tune it a little bit, I bet this is about ready to cut apart. Then to fine tune it, you can just take any cheapy modeling clay.
But this one's awesome. This one never dries.
This is plastilina, because there's similar products. This plastilina doesn't set if you leave it out or ever, because it's got oil. It's oil. So you can just use this, glop it on your thing, take it apart, use it again. And it's tough, but if you start kneading it, right, you have to knead it quite a bit. It'll soften up. Then you just take that and start smushing it on top of your tin foil. Do you want to knead a piece of this? Is there? Oh, that's all right. So does anybody need to see me squishing clay on this? Because I will. I'll just do a little piece. It's already starting to soften just from playing with the corner. Maybe. Yeah, it's fine. So you can just start making this into a bigger skin. And even if your tin foil is perfect, put a layer of this stuff on. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to peel your latex off as successfully. One thing that I have done in the past when we're in more of a hurry is do the tin foil and then just put a sheet of tin foil to get it a little bit smoothed out. And you can rub a little hand lotion or PAM, cooking spray, or petroleum jelly on your tin foil and then do your latex and paper just to ensure that it peels off. But the surface of this clay has a little bit of oil in it, so nothing really sticks to it. So you just continue to build your shape. And when you're dealing in the foam, like, you don't have to get it absolutely flawless and perfect, because the foam you're gonna enlarge it, and it's like a generic thing. So little tiny undercuts and details don't show as well. And we're starting a big project. We're working on the musical Seussical the musical, and we're doing an underwater, there's an underwater scene in it, and we're going to make all these kind of ABBA disco inspired starfish, jellyfish, and assorted sushi fish. And this is going to be a starfish. And since the image is mirrored, essentially, there's no reason to pattern the whole thing. So Rachel, did you do this one? Mm-hmm. So Rachel, she only did half because we're only interested in half because we're going to mirror it. So from tin foiling, and you can skip the tin foil if you've got enough clay. I think this one's all just clay. And you'll see she just wrapped some fabric on the dress form. So it's not stuck to the dress form. Like usually I think we wrap these in cellophane.
No, that's the skirt on.
You just were, she just needed a skirt. Oh,
so you didn't see her.
Yeah, we don't want to see her crotch, so she has a skirt. So this is step next kind of for this. And then this one, this is a Seuss fish that Rick's working on. The arms, these are going to eventually become great big fins and some showgirly headpiece and tights probably. But this one, see how the tail is curved on purpose? So this one we're going to actually end up patterning a right side and a left side so that we can get the tail to curve. This one has its layer of latex and paper towel on here. Grab me some paper towels and the latex. Or do I have it? I have the latex. Paper towels and then a paintbrush from the box behind the fire extinguisher on the first shelf. They're in a little cardboard box. Thank you, Rick. So this one's got its layer of stuff on there. And shortly, we're going to be kind of drawing our guide on here. You know, we've got to remember that they need to get inside of it. We need room for their arms. Something I often forget is how do they get into it? Is this hole in the bottom big enough for them to step in? Or do we need to design in some sort of slit or closure? And then this one will probably end up having big fabric fins to complete its ABBA disco look. That's perfect. So let's take some paper towels. And I'm going to paint some on our starfish. Do you just cut it or rip it? Doesn't matter. Cut it into strips. So we're going to just take our paper towel. I think you could use tissue paper too. We just use paper towels in here because we have rolls and rolls and rolls and rolls of them. Then just take your latex, Chicago Fire. I only worked on Chicago PD. Well, I worked some on Chicago Fire. But I made all the sexy bulletproof vests that they wear in both shows. Because if they don't stop bullets, they will not save your life. But they look good because they're cut. We made the ladies ones with darts and made them extra sexy. So I'm going to just put a little bit of latex on the area I'm going to work with. And you can play with, there's different weights of the latex. This one is runny, but it works really well with the paper towel. And then I'm going to just take and start laying strips of paper towel. Like you don't have to overlap it much, just a tiny bit, because we're going to then paint it with some more latex. And actually, initially I didn't like this runny stuff, but I think it works really well because this is the good one.
The other one was kind of watery, so you just have to put
more layers. But so this one's like medium watering, right? They are. And what's funny too with some of these products, like you might buy, say, Monster latex from the craft or makeup store on Monday, and then go buy another bottle of the exact same thing on a Wednesday, and the consistency will be completely different based on how long it sat on the shelf. And a lot of this stuff isn't the same from batch to batch. So it's more about just like figuring out what do you have to do to make the thing you've got work, instead of being frustrated that the thing you've got doesn't work the way it does last time, right? So you just continue to cover this stuff. And I'm not going to cover the whole thing, but I'm going to cover some of it. So you just keep going until you got your coat on the whole thing. And it's better to put it, you know, like even if we think we're going to cut out a big hole here in the bottom, it's better to cover more of your clay thing with the latex and tissue paper than to not have covered enough, because you can always edit away parts that you might not be using. Okay, so that's what's going on there. Any questions about like that little process before we start cutting up and blowing up a piece of our fish? No? All right. This is fun stuff. I'm trying to negotiate my hat here. So let's look at the fish a little bit.
Here we go. Could you do the same thing in paper mache if you were in a bind and cheat?
I don't think it's as good because paper mache isn't flexible. So where we can lay the latex down, and this is maybe $4 for this small jug of latex, and this has lasted a while. The paper mache will be brittle and it won't dry as fast. And part of what's nice about the latex is, you know, we are working in foam, and foam is somewhat flexible. So some of these areas on here that we felt we didn't need to cut a dart in, with the latex, we were able to just kind of smush it down and flatten it out. And with the latex stretching a little bit, it kind of repeats in foam, similar to the miniature clay that we worked with at the beginning. Okay. Here, you want to dump this out? Got to earn your keep, you know. Okay, so let's start kind of taking one of these things apart and looking at the step next before we enlarge it. We're done with that. Let's see. And this stuff, we just kind of catalog and hang on to it, you know, until it dry rots and I'm able to let it go. Which takes years, right, Rachel? Decades for me to say, let's throw that away. Although I threw away some old Christmas stuff the other day. I felt pretty good about that. Okay, so now let's look at our fish. And just, I don't know if you can see it in the camera quality. This, in the last about 10 minutes, has gone from kind of a milky white to like a buttery yellow. And it's almost set. But what we're going to do next is start dividing it up. And it's really up to your like intuition to figure out how to divide it up. And I would say Google some of the Macy's Day balloons and really zoom in on them, because you'll see that every now and then, you know, like Snoopy's ear has some weirdo cuts into it that aren't like the shape of an ear, but when put together, it makes the shape of an ear. So I'm going to start with like the practical holes, which is we need a hole. We need a little more room for the arm. So I'm going to just kind of pencil in my arm here a little bit. And then if you get any spots where you're like, oh, I think it's a little bit thin, or I miss the paper towel, like I have a little tiny spot there where I'm going to just put a little piece of tape to kind of help support it when I'm cutting it apart. And the masking tape sticks better to this stuff than the scotch tape. So then I'm going to put in that hole. And then I'm going to kind of look to try to make the hole the same on the other side. And even though our right and left sides are going to be different, I'm going to eventually put the two together to make sure that my armhole is the same from side to side. You know, so you can rough it in and then make it a little more perfect later. And I'm going to go around his neck. So we can put his head through there. And if you're like, want to get like ultra scientific and precise as you're messing through it, if you know the size of their head, I don't know how you'd measure this with a measuring tape, but you could measure the hole that you've created and the math that you've sorted out a little bit ago with this to see if the hole is going to be big enough when you're done. Will they actually be able to put their head through it? And now I'm going to go down here on the bottom. And these folks are going to be dancing. So we're going to give them kind of a bigger hole so that they can do their moves here. And the fish, this shape is going to stay rigid and hard. So we're going to use a porous EVA foam, which I'll show you here in a little bit. But the starfish arms and legs, we want the arms to be more flexible. So the starfish will probably do out of more like a 1/2 inch or 3/4 inch upholstery foam so that they can move their arm. And then, this one we want to be flexible. Or you can even do a combination. You could make the hat rigid and this outer part of the leg out of the rigid foam. And then where their body needs to move, use the upholstery foam. So you have to kind of think about the movement of the performer too. Like, do you want parts to stay rigid and some parts to stay flexible? So now that I've put in my leg and neck and armholes, I'm going to just kind of eyeball him in half to my bestest abilities. And then you'll see I'm going to kind of imagine the fish has a spine because the back of this is going to turn. So we actually want to pattern the turn in here. And I'm thinking on this one, when we go to paper, we're going to make the fin even a little bit bigger. So it's like we've got the difficult part of our shape sorted out. But if there's stuff you want to tweak a little bit, you can tweak it at this phase. So now I'm...
Like how you lifted the leg, like change his diaper.
Now we're going to change his diapers and, maybe take the pole out. So now I've got my...
The pole goes right up his butt.
So now I'm going to follow my front line around to the back. But then I'm going to kind of try to swoop over and keep it centered with my tail. Then, just kind of looking at where it has curves, I can start to just kind of already figure out where I probably want some darts and stuff. So I've got a cylinder essentially, right? So I think I'm going to have the most success by putting another set of seams from the nose down to the center of the tail, from the nose down to the center of the tail on each side. So it's going to all come together at the nose. So now I'm going to kind of divide the space under his arms. I like this pose. He's really like, yeah, I'm a fish.
I'm drowning. That's the pose.
Yankton High School is going to just have the funnest costumes for this show. Did you see, Rachel, 2 Yankton High School alums are getting nominated to the Yankton Fine Arts?
Ooh.
Ellie and Tim Houseman and Bob Winter, but I don't know who that is.
Bob Winter's the activities director.
They're being honored this year as outstanding contributors to the world and to Yankton. So now that I've got that in half, I'm feeling like we've got a good shape, but I've done this enough to know that we're going to need some more darts to get this belly and the head to curve. So we can cut it apart at this phase and then slice darts into it. But if you want some darts to match up, like if I want a dart up here to match a dart underneath, draw it in now. So I'm going to just put some darts where a lot of the curve is happening. And you can curve the dart too. So like, I'm also kind of thinking about like that this fish has a face maybe and some other things going on. So I'm going to try to put my darts into it in like an anatomical way rather than just completely an arbitrary way. Okay, so we're going to do that. We might put another little dart under the arm going down underneath again. And here I am. So my 2 sides are going to end up different because of the swoop of his tail. But I'm going to try to kind of make similar things going on. So I'm going to try to place my darts. You know, they're not going to be exactly symmetrical, but I'm going to get them close. So I think there's going to be darts there. And then to start to get this curve in the tail, we probably need some more darts in the back. So I'm going to just lay a dart. I'm looking where like the most of the curve is happening. And then on this side, it's kind of in a different place because the tail curves one way. So I'm not trying to completely match stuff. But before I cut this out now, I'm going to take a smaller Sharpie, which I've got, and give myself some points that match. So we've got darts, but now I'm going to give myself just some notches. And the reason I'm doing that in a different color is I don't want to slice this into a dart. So this is the left side of his body. So I'm going to just call this dart L, or this notch. This is a notch. The purple is a notch. L for left. We'll put another one back here. We're going to call this M. And then we're going to put one way down here on the tail. We're going to call that N. You can call them whatever you want. Actually, it looks like the Harry Potter lightning rod. Then the right side of his body, I'm going to put one up in the front. And see how like here I have my notch like between the two darts. And here I'm choosing to put it on his nose so that when you've got all these rando pieces lined up, there's only one way to match it. You don't want two darts or two notches that could fit together. So that's going to be R, S. I had to do the alphabet in my head to figure out what came after R. It's S, right?
Sierra, Tango. You know this.
What's U? I'll think of it. What's U? No. I don't know. Alpha. I can't think of it. Boy, my brain just went dead. So let's play with knives instead. So everybody kind of gets where we were at with this, like where I'm starting to put darts and why I didn't make my notches symmetrical, because it's going to be easier to do. Uniform is U. Romeo, Sierra, Tango, uniform. So now I'm going to use an X-Acto knife.
Or teensy type.
Oh yeah, maybe I should be using scissors, huh? So now I'm going to start slicing, and I'm cutting just a little bit into the clay. And actually, I can feel that it's still a tiny bit soft, so we could probably let it sit.
Their notches in the center back.
Yo, we should put one in the center back. Let's put a notch in the center back. Oh yeah, so like when we showed you those pictures at the beginning, we take a ton of them from every direction. I'm going to call this notch center back. And then I'm going to just put another one down on the tail. We take a lot of pictures so I added a center back and I added a notch further down on his tail. Take a lot of pictures because it's going to definitely help you, before you cut it out. So now you'd want to photograph this sucker. So it is still fragile, but if you're careful, you can just start peeling up the latex. And we're going to just deal with one side of this because we want to show you more stuff. So I'm going to get one side of this sucker completely cut apart. And it'll continue to cure more than it's cured right now. And the paper towel still lets it flex a little bit, but helps hold it together. So ask a couple questions while I'm razoring this sucker apart. So let's talk, this is a good time to just talk about the different foams here, and I'll show you some different foams. You can get upholstery foam like at Joann's or whatever your fabric store is, which is really good for stuff that you want to move. But if you've got to think about the thickness too of the foam. If you've got super duper thin foam and that's it, but you want an area to be more rigid, you might glue or stitch a couple thicknesses of foam in certain spots if all you have is the really flexible foam. And then there's EVA foam, which you can Google and get from different places, which is kind of like the foam that they use to make like the work surface mats, like in an auto body shop. And then we get a kind, I think it's polyethylene. I can send everybody the link to what this black foam is. We get an EVA foam that has pores in it so that it's more, it's even lighter weight than EVA foam, but it's cellular wise, it's similar to the EVA foam. But when I send the links out, I can let you guys know exactly what this black foam is. There, I think I'm getting it. So you just got to kind of keep working around. And actually, it's coming. And even if you get like little yucky edges starting to stick together, you can kind of fix it when we tape it down to a piece of typing paper or whatever paper you want. So now I just need a razor out under his leg a little bit more. Maybe I should use scissors. You know what? The scissors actually work better. I think the razor works better when it's cured more, but since this is still setting, it's still setting, we're just going to use scissors. So I'm going to just keep going. We don't want to mess it up yet. And I'm going to see if I can get it over his arm. Did you get me little scissors? Oh. There, it's coming. Will his arm fit? Will it fit? Yeah. Take your sleeve off. And you'll see the latex is stuck a little bit to the wood because the wood isn't greasy. So now I'm going to just keep going here. Oh, good. That's good. It's like making a snake molt on command, you know? It's the legs, you know? I almost cut my cord. So now we might unscrew. Does that come out? No, it doesn't come out. You just got to figure out what angle to get in there. There we go. Then also, I would recommend anybody who's going to be getting into this heavily to start hunting around in your town and seeing if there is somebody that's doing foam manufacturing or what resources you have to get foam, because we've found several different things in Chicago at different times just based on, like, you know, calling people and saying, hey, I see you're upholstering cars. Is there something we might be able to buy from you? And the soft foam, like the upholstery foam, if you just start Googling, you'll find there's places that sell that that'll just ship it right to your front door, which is great. So I've almost got him off of the tail. And I want to mark the inside of my tail too. I want to continue my seam around. So even though I thought it was all marked, I found some more things to mark. And in a minute, we're going to blow some of this up. I'm going to blow up a piece. Rick is going to blow up a piece. Maxine might blow up a piece. Dynamite. Oh, blow it up like dynamite. Okay, so here's where we're at now. So the other half we're going to just leave. So now I'm going to start cutting out my big darts and my big seams. So I'm going to start with this big long, so see how it doesn't want to lay down? It's because it needs to have stuff released. So we're going to go to our nose, and actually I don't want to lose that little bit of point that was in the nose. So I'm going to just stick a piece of tape on it and kind of redraw, like I have the vapors of the latex there, but I want to make it a little bit better. you're right. The most expensive scissors do work the best.
Mm-hmm.
Use your most expensive scissors to do this. Well, these ones aren't the most expensive. They're the most expensive little ones. So now I can kind of see where like the most cut in, or like the most valley of the tail is. So I want to cut right to the valley. So we have our top chunk, and then we have our bottom chunk. I'm also, while I'm here, remembering that my neck is. So I'm going to just put a little mark so that I know where my neck starts, so that we don't close the neck hole later. And it's clearer where the back of my neck was. So the more info you keep putting on here as you're working, the happier you will be. Then, when I peeled it up, if I put a little tear in the latex, I'm going to just put a tape it down. So this is going to be the underside of our body. So now do you see, as soon as I cut that, a dart opened. As soon as I slit that, it opened because of the curve. And you start to get an intuition for where darts and stuff need to be, just the more you do this stuff. And if you marked a dart and lay it down and it doesn't really open up, like these bottom, I marked 2 little darts here, but they don't feel like they need to open up. So we're just gonna skip them. So I marked 2 darts there, but when I push the latex down, it doesn't need to open. So we actually don't need those darts in our pattern. So I'm gonna tape them back up. I'm gonna tape that one. I'm gonna say we don't need it. And I'm going to say we don't need this one either. Don't need it. Don't need it. And here's where the latex is nice, where like I have a little weird shape going on where it cut underneath the guy's legs, but I can just smash it flat. Would you get me just a little brown paper for me, like about this big? So now I'm going to cut so this is my bottom. So this would be a good time to write in what this opening is. This is my legs down there. Now let's open up our top. Thank you. That's good right there. So now we do have these darts that are going to match back up later. So that dart's going to match back up. This itty bitty dart under the arm, it might not need to be there, but we're going to find out when we push it down. It does need to be there. Now we're coming to a spot that needs more addressing, more than just a dart. So let's see if you can zoom. Can you see that that's bubbled up? Yeah, that shows. So I'm working my way down the back of my fish, but to get over the shoulder, I actually need more room. So if you need more room, you can't see how my finger lays underneath here. If you need more room, cutting a dart isn't going to change anything. We actually need to separate these 2 pieces so that we can have room for the foam to go over the shoulder. So where I had this little dart under my armpit, I'm actually going to cut that off, and I'm going to put a seam across the shoulder. Or, see, I was thinking to put a seam across the shoulder. To get room across the shoulder, all I needed to do was open up the underarm. So I actually don't need a seam on my shoulder. The advantage to putting a seam on the shoulder is to make the pieces smaller to work with and not eat up your foam so fast. But I think for this one, we're going to leave no seam in the shoulder. So did that make sense to you guys, what happened there and why I said to put a seam in the shoulder and then change my mind? I had this extra fabric in the shoulder, this extra latex. And as soon as I cut the armpit apart, I'm able to open it up totally. So that's going to be that whole piece. Now, I do have a spot in this tail where I feel like we do need a dart. So this under dart on the underside of the tail, it laid flat, but there's more curve going over the top of the tail. So I'm going to cut that dart into there until it'll lay flat. And the rest is good. So now let's take a piece of paper and here's where we're going to use the clear tape. And we are going to enlarge this sucker. First we're going to tape it down, then we're going to enlarge it. So I'm just kind of smashing the different parts of it flat. Like it's still stretchy. Like I don't want to stretch it out, but I can like ease it open a little bit to get it to lay. I've got my tail there. And if it wants to curve, let it curve. And even if it seems like, oh, maybe a piece is curving not the direction you thought it would, just trust what's going on in the miniature one. So now let's tape our big one down. And then we're going to start enlarging this. And actually, I think if I enlarge a piece and Rick enlarges a piece, we're good. So you're jeweling, yeah? Oh, okay. I was going to have you enlarge a piece, but I think we ended up with less pieces. So you're good. Keep the Australia celebration going. So we're going to figure out the math, and then Rick is going to take one of these pieces, and I'm going to take one of these pieces to blow up. So to make the blowing up easier, you can also Xerox it on a paper. Do you think you want yours Xeroxed, or you can just measure from this? You can just measure from this. Okay. So you can't get it too taped down. Then at this point, you know, earlier I said let's make the fin a little bit bigger. Let me cut these two guys apart. And I'm going to just add a little paper to my one fin because I don't have enough paper. Then we would just do the same, we would add the same amount on the other side. So if I just want my fin to be just a little bit bigger, I can go in and draw, I'm going to just extend my fin the tiniest bit. But if we were doing the whole thing, we would have the other half and make sure that what we've added here matches up to what we have over there. And I think since this is little, we don't need to enlarge it that much. Like we're not going to make this adult size. Let's just make it 3 times bigger because that's an easy one to do. So you're going to put your dot down and left and go make everything from here to make it 3 times larger. Yeah. Yeah? Oh, good. Maxine's done this a bunch. And so I'm going to make mine 3 times bigger also. Actually, you know what? Let me see, Rick. We might just make it twice as big because I want it to not be so big that we can't glue it together today. Let me just measure. Would you grab me a yellow ruler, Miss Rachel? Or you know what? This quilting one might be big enough if we're only going twice as big. Let's just measure it and find out. So this is called radial projection, which is a way to enlarge stuff. And again, this is new today to the majority of folks, but a repeat for some. So sorry for those that it's just a repeat for. Before I tell you how it works, 13, so we only need to get to 26. Yeah, just double it. Okay. So you're going to do everything times 2. Right. Okay. So we're going to tape this on to our piece of paper. So I have the neck and the armhole of the fish. Rick has the underside of the fish. And we just have the left side is all we're dealing with right now. I guess I will use this one a little bit. That's the best. That's the best one. Not so the only rule for this really is that you want to start on an extreme. So imagine this is in a box. You need to start either on the extreme right or the extreme left. And since I've taped my paper to the left, we're going to start on the left. So we need to be outside and below the image. I'm going to give myself an X. And everything that I measure is going to start from the X. I need a little coffee real quick.
Oh, you actually have coffee in it.
I got this for a Christmas present. It's amazing, but it took me forever to figure out how to make it open. Okay, so 0 of my ruler is always going to be on the bottom left X here. And first, I'm going to just measure like corners, right? I'm going to just start by plotting in corners. So I've got my first corner is at 4 3/8, so I'm going to put a dot at 8 3/4. So here's what's going to get weird, is some of your markings are going to be on your image. So just mark them on your image, and then we'll use a tracing wheel to mark them through to the other side. So you could use a different colored marker here if you want to keep it more organized in your head. So then I'm going to just, so see this mark right here, this dot here has now moved to there because we've enlarged it. So now I'm going to just keep finding spots. And it's easier if you're within a segment of line, it's easier to just find a number you can multiply. So I can take 6 times 2 much easier than I could take 6 1/8 times 2. So I'm going to just keep moving my ruler. 7 times 2 is 14. 8 1/4 times 2 is 16 1/2. Then I'm going to just keep working along the bottom line before I put in the darts. 8 5/8 times 2 is 16 17 1/4. I have to say it out loud. Sorry, guys.
No, I can't even do those.
9 times 2 is 18. And you can also like put in less marks and just use your brain to connect the lines a little bit. 10 1/2 is 21. 11 is 22. 12 is 24. 12 1/2 is 25. 13. So I kind of started this bottom edge. Now I'm going to go put a little bit of my dart in. So that's the bottom of my dart. Now I'm going to mark the top of my dart. So I've got 8 3/8, so that's 16 3/4. That's the top of my dart. Now I can mark spots within the dart if I want, or I can just kind of use my brain and repeat the shape of the curve that's going on with that dart. Then let me just take a curved ruler. That big neon one will be great. So now I'm going to just start putting in some of these lines to make myself feel better about what's going on here. And you can use this patterning for so many things. Like if you're trying to make an elf hat that curves one direction, just make a little one in tin foil and paper towels or something, cover it, and go to town. And it's okay too to stray a little bit from a point. Like if you feel like, oh, I think this curve should curve this way a little bit, go ahead and do that. But I'm just looking again what I've got in miniature and making it in full size. So we're only doubling the size. So if we were making this for a grown man, we might be taking everything times 4 or 5. I'm losing my voice. Or you can also use this in the copy machine like we talked earlier, but this is great. So say we were taking it times some weird amount. Let's say that we wanted our thing to be 111% bigger, or that we wanted every, let's do a different one. Let's make it more extreme. Let's say that we wanted every 7 inches to equal 17 3/4 of an inch. Instead of trying to do that math in your head, you just measure your small points and the math is already done. So this one that we're doubling, we would put 2 on 4. And all the math is there. So 2 1/8 is 2 1/4. 3 1/2 is 7. You can just use this to do the math for you. But we picked easy math. So always keep your 0 on 0 and just keep putting in all your different points. Again, you can do more or less points depending on your comfort level here. So now I've got this part of my fin. And now I'm back to finding things that are easy for me to multiply. Times 2. But that's where the wheel comes really in handy, or enlarging it. I've also done this where we take the latex one and retrace it really nice on white paper and then enlarge that, like we fine-tune the pattern in Mini and then blow it up so that you're not dealing with all this crinkled stuff. So I've got the back, my neck is going to start there, and I've got this little hump going down the back. And I should put in a couple of my notches because we care about the notches. So there's a notch right there. So the purple notches that I drew in, now I'm putting them in. This is the notch we called center back. Okay, now I'm going to put my neck in. Isn't this cool? I hope you guys are digging this because I know I sure do. So now I have the rest of my neck opening, and I'm not putting in millions and millions of dots because I can get, right, I bet this is too small to bend in the black foam.
Yeah, it is.
It is, but we're just showing you the idea. Yeah. If we made it so huge, we wouldn't be able to do any more of it in our short class. So now I'm going to just keep putting in. So there's my neck. Now I need a smaller ruler.
Not much smaller.
Not much smaller. So I'm getting my little nose put in. Okay, we've kind of got the top side of this nearly done. Now I need to deal with the armhole and these big darts in the front. So this side of the armhole is going to be 6 1/4. So now I'm drawing on top of my latex thing. So here's where a different colored Sharpie would be a good idea. Because I'm ending up on top of stuff, but that's okay. And if it looks like something's a straight line, just do the extreme parts of the straight line. So here's the space under my armhole is going to here. There's the rest of that. It's happening. And I'm going to just put in kind of like the extreme parts of the armhole and then draw in the rest myself. So I'm going to just get in the top and the sides, and then I'm going to freehand it. So now I've got my armhole. And here too, you can say, oh, I don't like what I drew on the latex. I want it to be more round. And then, find something to lay down to make it round. Okay, only a few more spots. It does get goofy when you're drawing over the top of it, so be prepared to get a little frustrated the first time. Practice your visual skills, It's all visual. That's something Cheryl would tell you, my mom. So now I got this huge dart. I can put in more points of it, or I can just the dart has a curve to it. So I'm going to just try to repeat what I see in the small one, or put in more points. It's your call. And then right in the middle of that, I have notch L. And you can like Also, when you're done, you can, what we call walking it together, you can take this piece and then match it up to the other piece that joins it and see if you feel like, oh, this notch isn't quite in the right spot, or this needs a little more room, or that needs a little less room. Can you reach that white rotary cutter right there? Thank you, thank you. So now I'm gonna cut this out, but I want to take a tracing wheel, which I have. Oh, I want a spiky. I'm gonna grab a spiky tracing wheel. I'll be back in 2 seconds. All right. I'm back. So now these parts that are over my original, I want to mark through to my good pattern piece of paper. So we're just using a tracing wheel. And the thick foams or the denser foams, like the black foam we're going to use, let's see, what did I just cut underneath? Nothing. You can get in different thicknesses too. So like we have 1/2 inch, which is going to be too thick for our tiny little thing here. But if we had 1/4 inch or 3/8 of an inch, it would work. It would work better in this small one. And a good foam resource that does ship is called Foam Craft USA, but I don't know how expensive the shipping is for like a giant 4x8 foot roll of foam. It weighs nothing but the size. So if you can dig around where you live and find out what foam resources you have. But what's cool about this stuff is the same ideas apply to all sorts of foam and all sorts of weird costume crafty stuff. Okay, so we've got our little fish bit, and what's cool is in the paper you can start to see that, like, oh my gosh, it actually looks like that half of that thing we did. So now here, where this great big dart is, we're ending up with a little bit of a point in our fish. So if we wanted a little bit less point there, that would be a spot where we would go back, and instead of having just this one singular big dart, if we added a third dart in there, it will soften the point. So the more you have stuff opening up, the better off you're going to be. So I'm going to trace this in black vinyl-y stuff and then get some of the A-Team to paint some glue on it. And like as far as adhesives and stuff go, we're going to be using the ultra toxic outdoor stuff inside just because it's cold. This is just contact cement by Weldwood, which you can get at the hardware store. They also now have, and we can't find it in Chicago, but we found it in other towns, a contact cement gel, which works way better because you only need 1 coat of it and it doesn't run. This we're going to probably use 2 coats of. The thing that doesn't work with the EVA type foams or the rubberized foams is rubber cement. I thought it would stick to it and bought us gallons and gallons of rubber cement, but rubber cement works different than contact cement. Rubber cement has a quality that you can remove it and replace something, like if you're putting pictures in an album.
Someone asked if you've ever used foam insulation sheet.
The stiff foam, like the rigid foam?
Uses them for model trains and they can spray paint.
No, I haven't. Is it flexible?
Well, I mean, we've used the sheets where we glue it together, like that kind of foam.
Yeah, do you mean like the thin? Is it like come in different thicknesses but still bends? Describe more. Let's get a chunk of this. What? I know. It's Australia Day. We're having Australia-y food soon. I think they're Australia-y. Pies. I just made bacon wrap water chestnuts because it's the only thing I know how to make. So if you look at this foam, and I'll send you guys the info on this when I send out the links. This is the same chemical makeup as what's called EVA foam. And another good place to get more about this stuff is from cosplay stuff on YouTube. But this one is like EVA foam, but it has air whipped into it. So it's a little bit flexible, so you can ease it onto itself. So if like to get a curve, you know, where we smash the latex bigger and it needs to be shrunk up, this will do that. And it's surprisingly way lighter than the plain EVA foam. Like the EVA foam that a lot of the cosplay folks use is great, but it gets heavy really, really, really fast. So this one is just a little bit lighter. And this is from Foamcraft USA, but I'll figure out exactly which one it's called. You can also email Larry at Foamcraft USA and say, I want the same foam that Travis Halsey uses. But I'll get you, I will get you that name. And Larry's one of those people that, like, he's not there to chit chat with you all day, but he can answer a direct question. But he won't know what you're working on or care. You know what I mean?
The
so
foam they're talking about is pink, some is blue. I think it is what we've used.
Yeah, that stuff doesn't bend, but you can carve it.
Yeah,
so yeah, and today's class is about making like round 3-dimensional things. So that's why we're not looking at any of that other kind of stuff. So we have found that getting the pattern onto this stuff, we've tried lots of different things. The silver metallic Sharpie works the best. And sometimes we'll grab a box that just says Sharpie silver and not metallic Sharpie. The one that isn't metallic doesn't write on this stuff, but the one that's metallic does. And then if you're doing huge pieces and tons of them, we found this mean streak Sharpie, which is what they draw on the tires of the cars to see if you've got a ticket.
What?
Yeah, that's how they mark your tire on the street. Oh, for holes too. Oh, yeah. So this writes on tires. Yeah, how do they use it? What do they do? Oh, yeah, if you've over parked in like a 15-minute zone, they mark your tire and then come back and take the time. But it's like a push-up pop, and you can kind of grind it on your material to make more of a point, but this thing works really good, especially if you're doing huge things. And you have to let it sit for just a minute or it will smear, right? But let's look. So we can look closer at this manatee for just a second. So he was marked with the mean streak marker, and this was our mock-up for the kid. So, and you'll see too that like at points that we didn't completely match the notches. What we did was we matched our bottom bit when we're hooking it together, matched our top bit, and then just like if we were dealing with fabric, we kind of ease it together. And then also when we put this on the kids, we realized I didn't give them enough room for their heads and arms to get in. So I slit the back. But what we ended up doing on the final costume was slitting the shoulder and putting Velcro in the shoulder. So let's get this cut out. Are you far from foam? How close? You're pretty close. Okay. Left. Oh, I think we're going to be good. So we're going to get this glued together and then covering it, right? That's we cover stuff a lot of times with Lycra and paint the Lycra, or we actually print a lot too. So Lycra works really well over this hard foam, but if you're making stuff in the soft foam, you can just cover it with fashion fabric, and we'll show you that. But if I was going to cover this fish in Lycra, I would make my cover a tiny bit smaller. I wonder who's calling me over and over again. What was I saying? Oh, so if I was going to make the pattern for my Lycra with this, I would make the Lycra, instead of taking it times 2 inches, I would probably take it like times 1 3/4 inches so that the Lycra is a little bit tighter over it. And that's something that you kind of have to play with a little bit. So make a sample, you know? And even if we were going to make a dozen of these fish huge, it's worth it to mess with it small and get it fine-tuned before you go totally crazy. And a knife, an X-Acto knife, seems to cut this stuff out the best. Actually, Lydia is, when we've got foam, we just bring Lydia hand shit here and she cuts all our foam. Because she has young legs and she can get on the ground and do this. We can't do that. It just, oh, Rachel and I are too tall and clumsy to kneel down and do this. It just kills me. And oh no, is it easier? It's working? Oh, good. Yeah. Oh, that's a good point, because the centimeters are more fine-tuned already to just find all the centimeters. Rick can't take 3 3/8 times 3 3/8 in his head. I can't either. Am I gonna kill you guys if I just paint glue on this right here? I should have them paint glue on it in the hallway. Rick, how soon are you till foam? Seconds, okay. So we're gonna pop that apart. So cool. We'll also send everybody a picture of our fish once we get them done in full size in the next couple weeks. The fish and the starfish both, they're gonna be in the show. So now I'm gonna just mark which edges I want Rick to put contact cement. Cut it right on the line, and you bring me that and I'll cut it out of foam while you start contact cementing this one in the hallway. So I'm just marking the edges that need glued, because this is going to be the top side of our fish. And what's cool is you can see, like, I should have walked my pattern together to make sure that my dart fit perfectly, because here it doesn't. But since this foam has the air in it, you can ease it together. So this will make the bottom side of our fish. And it bends, yeah. So that's what's nice about this stuff, is like it naturally wants to be curvy. This is gonna go to red. It's smelly. While we're waiting for our other pattern piece, let's just look at a piece of soft foam. We'll sew this together here in a minute. So the soft foam, if we were doing like the dragon we showed you earlier, Rachel's dragon, we would put fashion on one side and then mark all of our pattern pieces or our darts and stuff on the other side. And you can find, if you mess around on the internet, years ago we found some foam that has kind of a fabric backing on it, so the sewing machine glides right on it. Now, if your foam didn't have a fabric backing, you could take netting or a sheer organza or like sports mesh or whatever you want. So if this foam, see how like there's the spongy side, and then ours has a little bit of fabric on it. But if you can only find the foam that's spongy on both sides, it's amazingly easier to use if you lay a piece of netting or mesh over it, because then the sewing machine will glide right over it. Whereas if you tried to sew this even with a walking foot, the rubbery side is going to jam up your operation. So here, Rick is going to take this one in the hallway and put rubber cement there, put it inside the dart. So you're going to go along this edge in the dart there and to here. And then I'll mark the other side for you. So he's going to put a layer of contact cement on here, which will cure in about 15 minutes, and just use the same brush. We usually put a second layer on it, but for today, just one thick one will be good. So we're gonna gas out the people in the hallway. So now let's take his piece. Actually, let me make sure I have it so that it's gonna match up with your piece. Yeah, hold that one here. So I'm just checking to make sure that I'm gonna cut his paper out in the right direction so that it will match up with my underside. And it looks like that's the way it needs to go. Okay, so that's for Rick. So then, there's your piece. So then if we were making this and covering it with fabric, you want to add a generous amount of seam allowance on like your neck edge, your leg edge, your armpit edges, so that you can wrap the fabric over the edge to the inside. And then I'll show them boning the thin foam too with that machine. Oh, I'm caught. Hang on. Okay. So now let's trace Rick's piece on here. And he's gonna contact cement this piece too. But you could use this patterning for hats, for like character shoes. You know, if you need to make a woolly mammoth puppet, I think it would be really practical for patterning puppets. Since we're working little, I'm not so concerned about marking in all of our notches, but I'm going to put that one in there. I'll put that one in there too. So now I'm going to mark the edges that he is going to rubber cement. And cut this out. And then while that's curing, I'm going to just show you a couple other things. So if you're making, let's say we were making this fish and we're covering it in Lycra, like we talked about earlier, you can pattern the Lycra a smidge smaller, or use the same pattern and just make your seam allowance a little bit bigger so that it's actually making it a tiny bit smaller. But if you were going to take this same little fish and cover it in a fabric that doesn't stretch, you actually need more around the edges of your pattern than the pattern pieces for the foam, because what happens is when you bend this material, the face of it or the audience side of it is actually larger than your original pattern. Did that make sense how I said that? So when we take this sucker, which I only kind of cut through, when we take this, and on a bigger scale, it's even more important. Boy, I didn't push very hard, did I? When you take something that's like this and curve it, this side actually gets longer than your pattern piece. So if you took your pattern piece and cut your skin, if we were making a snuffleupagus suit, if you cut your skin exactly the same size as this, it's going to be too tight and won't fit over it. So you could use your same pattern piece, but add maybe like another quarter all the way around or ½ inch all the way around, and give yourself generous seam allowance. Then expect to have to fit it over your foam parts. Expect that you're going to put the skin over it and maybe have a little bit to take in here and there. Okay. So, Chelsea, would you give this to Rick in the hallway? He'll know what to do. So now let's go to the sewing machine, and I'm going to show you a couple things. I'm going to get one of them set up here. Let's just look at another piece of foam. I'm on my way to the sewing machine. So if you're not using a rigid foam and you're using a flexible foam, I'll cut out a piece of fur too. I'm going to show you one thing that we do, which is add structure to this stuff. So you can think about, you know, how you bone a bodice or like ribs on a skeleton. If we want to take a piece of this white spongy foam and beef it up, you can stitch casings onto it and slide in. We use these gigantic 36-inch nylon zip ties. So these are just zip ties from Amazon, or you can find them at the hardware store. And we use this stuff to beef up the foam and put some structure in it. So you can still have flexible areas, but think about where you want something to not collapse and you can beef it up. So if you have a walking foot machine, not a walking foot for your machine, hopefully everybody knows the difference. If you have a walking foot machine, we zigzag right through this plastic and it doesn't snap. If you zigzag through the plastic, take it out and do it again, it will break, but it can handle like one pierce every so often through the plastic. Alternately, you could just take bias tape or ribbon, stitch a channel, and slide the plastic into the channel. So I'm going to just sew a little piece of plastic on this, and I'm also want to show you, this is going to make a mess. If you're covering stuff in fur, the fur can get pretty horrible to deal with. But I'm going to just show you one trick to dealing with fur. One thing is, it's good to cut fur from the back side. So I'm going to just cut off. I'm not really making a piece here. I'm just going to kind of show you. Let's say we're going to do something with fur and a dart. If you slice it from the back, you don't kill the nap as bad, and you have less of a mess on your table. And I'm barely pushing down. I'm just slicing the back of it so that we haven't cut the hairs so much. It's like going to fuzz some, but not bad. But then let's say that we're making a big teddy bear costume, and I'm going to have lots of seams of fur joining each other. Let's say I'm going to be joining a piece of fur to a piece of fur. One way to make your life easier is to cover it with netting first so that it's easy to sew through. And this is something we just figured out, but we've done it a few times and it works great. You take a piece of netting, and then when we stitch around it, the netting is going to keep the fur out of the feed dogs, and it's also going to keep the nap of the fur lying the right direction, and you have less stuff exploding, and then later on we're going to razor away the netting. So if we were taking our fish and covering it with fur, or making our fish out of this soft foam, I would entrap it with netting so that I'm not dealing with all the fuzz getting sucked into my sewing machine while we're working on it. So let's just go sew a couple things now. Let's do our piece with the darts, or with the bones. We got to negotiate the cords here. So we have some machines from the Sailrite Company, which is in Indiana, and they make sewing machines for making sails, but they're a walking foot machine, and they're not very expensive at all. The zigzag model's a little bit more expensive, but it's worth it. And that's what you can use to put boning right onto the foam. And it works better than a walking foot on a home sewing machine, because the top and bottom are moving and the needle is also moving, so it's pulling everything all at the same time. And a home machine, this might be too sturdy for a home machine. But if you were using a home machine and wanted to bone with these zip ties or steel boning, you could bone with all sorts of stuff. Just stitch a casing into the foam and then slide your bone into the casing. But we'll look at how this goes. If I'm set to zigzag, I'll probably break a needle in. nothing will work. We'll find out. And you want nice long stitches. Is my hat in the way?
No, it's fine.
Oh, I popped off. And you can reverse with this, but squint. And you don't want to put, like if I screwed this up and wanted to redo it, I would just start with a new piece of plastic because it can only take so many perforations before it starts to snap. But we made 3 Mrs. Teapots. I could send everybody a picture of that too, for Beauty and the Beast, where all of her skirt pieces have 2 rows of this boning and then darts on the outside. Actually, why don't I just sew some darts on the outside of this? It looks really bright. There. So I just stitched over that. But then if I start to put darts in it like it was my foam, it's kind of a rib, so it's gonna help keep a shape. So just that's something to think about, like where you want shape to stay. So now if I put, Rick, in 5 minutes, will you get the toaster oven plugged in somewhere and find my little bacon things in the fridge and stick them on a pan and warm them up? Yeah. We'll even broil them a little bit so the bacon gets crispy. So now check it out. So we don't have a pattern here, but if we did, let's say we had something filled with darts. I should have put my rib on the other side because of where the paper is on this, or where the fabric is. But then let's just stick a couple darts in and you'll kind of get the idea for like when to use the bone. The foam too, like if you're sewing different foams, if you really have to like work to not have to unpick stuff, because the more unpicking you do, the foam eventually it'll just rip. But you know, so you want to kind of commit to what you're doing. And the darts on this, they'll sew on a regular home machine. So now what's cool is whether, oh, it's really bright, but you can, there, so you can kind of see that like that bone is going to help keep a shape no matter what you're doing. You can think about if you want a shape to stay. So if you were making, you know, like the Michelin Tire Man foam costume, he's going to need some rigidity every now and then, and that's why you can play with these bones. I'll send everybody a picture of our Mrs. Teapot too, so you can kind of see like her inside is rows and rows of darts with 2 of these zip ties down it, and that's what's helping. The zip ties are pushing her shape out like a covered wagon would. Let's go to this sewing machine now. And I'm gonna put a seam in some, or I'm gonna show you kind of a way to deal with fur. So again, I'm using a zigzag. And since I don't want my fur getting in the way, I'm putting a piece of netting over this. And the netting is also helping my fur glide under the foot and not get caught. And I broke my thread.
If you want a longer foam than 36 inches.
Then you'd need to order steel hooping. Somebody asked what would we do if we needed more than 36 inches. I think you can actually get those in 72 inches in some places, but the steel hooping, and we get ours from hoopwire.com. Do you want to show them that giant roll? The steel hooping works very well. And you could also, sometimes we cut the steel hooping in half. It's like 2 bands of steel. Yeah. So here's our giant roll of steel hoop. We cut, it's 2 bands of steel, and you could stick this whole thing into a casing, or you could cut it in half and just zigzag over a band of steel. A single band would fit under a home sewing machine. So if we were making a giant fur bear costume, you could keep netting over all your pieces. So essentially we're like flatlining netting to fur to foam. You could keep the netting over all your pieces until you're done. And when you're working with fur too, one thing that can help your fur work is to really think about which way the fur brushes, which way does the nap lay, because you can ruin something that you worked really hard on by having one piece where the fur seems to run in an unnatural direction. So think about like when you're petting your cat, which way does its fur run? Yeah, yeah. So I've just entrapped my fur. You know, so imagine this is like on a darted piece, like if we were making a fur fish. But then what it lets you do easier, as you make a fur fish, then if you've got darts and stuff inside of it, it's a little bit easier to mash this stuff under the machine and work your shape into it. Oh, except right there, I about broke a needle. You'll break needles doing this stuff. Expect to be frustrated and more frustrated. Then hand me the razor blade. So I've just stitched a random dart in here. But now, when you're done, when you've seamed all your different pieces together, you just come in and barely catch the netting, and then you can just start pulling the netting out of your seams. And it's kept the fur kind of managed, and it's kept the fur from getting into your sewing machine. And I'm just barely catching the top of the net because I don't want to cut the fur. You know, we still want all of the fur to be there. Okay, so there. Then when you have your seams together, so like we have our little dart here, then you can just take a comb or a brush or a pin and you start pulling all of that out. So we've kept the fur along in the seam or the dart that I sewed in. Then when you work it all out and rebrush it, it's not as noticeable that there's a giant dart in there creating the shape. And so the more fur you can pick out of the seam, the more you can start to disguise that there's a seam in there. And same with any of the other seams. Give me that piece there, that one. So you can also, like on the dragon, it's just fashion fabric sandwiched on. So I'm going to just sew in these darts into this piece of fashion. So we're going to flatline it first to the foam and then sew the darts in because it would be impossible to do it all at once. So I'm going to sew in these 4 darts. And I'm going to just, so I'm flatlining the foam. And if your foam doesn't have the fabricy backing on it, this came from somewhere in Michigan. I'll try to find their info too. They were also rude on the phone. I can't remember what the issue was. They sent us, yeah,
the backing on this is different than what we
thought. Yeah. They said that the backing on this was a woven fabric, and we called and double checked, and it's actually just Pellon interfacing.
And if we wanted to return it or exchange,
that's what it was. We were going to exchange it, and it was going to cost us like $500 to have the foam reshelved. That's what it was. They wanted a reshelving fee, which is just silly. So I'm going to flatline my darts. Because the other thing, like when you're covering stuff with foam, you can also think of like, do you want the fabric stuck right to the foam like we're doing now? Or do you want to cover the fabric over the foam? Like, do you want to make 2 separate things? And I think we've never done the other. We like to stick the fabric right to the foam. Because I think you get less bubbles and puckers and stuff doesn't shift around. Yeah, this makes it a little smoother. Because also when you end up bending, when you do it this way and then stitch the piece and turn it inside out, the foam pushes against the fabric and fills it in really nice. So I'm going to just sew 2 of these darts in. A couple of them are at the doctor right now. I brought some from home.
Is it fabric spray based?
It's not, but grab that basting spray can if there's one in there. We love basting spray, and actually, had I thought of it, I would have just showed you that first. This product is amazing. It's Dritz spray adhesive. So don't use spray adhesive because it'll gum up your machine. It's just glue. This is like a temporary tack. So if we sprayed fabric to this foam and came back tomorrow, it won't be stuck to it. But if you spray it right before you sew it, you don't need any pins, and you can sew through it and it doesn't gum up your machine. So now if I'm going to put in my 2 darts, there's 4 darts here, I'm going to just put in 2. I'm going to pin it just like I would a garment and stitch her all together. You want to bring in the pieces from the hallway. Do you think they're sticky? So then you've also got to make sure that you're not getting chicken lips where the dart prolapses out. I don't know what else to call it. What? Oh, it's other lips. So be mindful of what's going on the other side of this operation. So I probably have a weird lip because I'm not taking too much time. So like, right, you could also combine a bone into here if you wanted to, if you thought it's going to deflate or you want to beef it up. Another thing that we like to use is hula hoops. Like the inside of that dragon head has kind of a gyroscope shape of hula hoop helping hold it all out. So I'm going to stitch in my other dart. And I think most home machines can handle this like 3/8 or 1/2 inch foam. But if you start working on foam, or it's going to be your life's ambition, and you don't think your machine can handle it, you're just going to have to experiment with machine. Oh, I got a little chicken lip.
Other side does.
See?
Don't show this
Well, it has a little one too. I've got chicken lips. But so you can start to see that like the foam is actually pushing against the fabric. Oh, no, I have a different hat. I'm going to the rice fields. I'm going to hell. So that, you can sandwich fabric on foam, which is really great. So now let's stick together our fish pieces and then do some questions. And with the video link, I'll find out exactly what Foamcraft calls this black foam. But I would say everybody's going to have more success. I lost my microphone. I'm back. I would say everybody would have more success just finding out where people in your town or state are getting foam, because you're just, you want to find out what's available to you. So now that these edges have a coat of glue on them, so we usually use 2 coats of glue, because you'll see what happens with just 1 coat. It's over time, if you just use 1 coat of the contact cement, it starts to pull apart. The other thing with the contact cement is it gets better the longer you let it sit. So this one will bond them together, but if they rested like 15 minutes and it's kind of cold and moist, if you let it rest longer, the adhesion will be more instant. And there's some info on the can about that. But so see this one, it's still a little bit wet. So it sticks, but it wants to pull apart. So if we let it sit just a little bit longer, it's going to start to stick more. And the other thing that you'll want to do is once you kind of stick a section down, stick the next section down, then come back and push them all together. So like my dart here is pretty much stuck in, but later on, like in 5 minutes, I'm going to come back and just push it all together again to make sure that the bond is happening. And if you go to push it together and it just pulls apart, it means you need another coat of contact cement and to let it dry even longer. So see this one, it's because of the weather. It needs to just sit a little bit longer. But I think I can keep sticking together. That'll do it. That little bit of me blowing on it. Actually, grab me some big binder clip. Oh, here's one.
Oops, there was.
Yeah, so the contact cement just needs a little bit longer because we've got kind of a damp Chicago day. But you get the idea. Then, so you'd want to put the darts, that's all right. You want to get your darts or seams in each big piece before you put together, get the small darts and stuff done in each piece before you put the big piece together. Oh, the one he painted first is instantly stuck. So this one has sat longer, so the bond was much quicker. Then the other thing that you can think of, so what another thing you can do is like on the final ones of these, you know, the kids aren't careful with stuff. Actors, dancers aren't that careful with stuff. Where you have a seam that runs into somewhere that's going to get pressure or strain, so like the leg hole of this gets a lot of movement and pulling, we contact cement, we call like little band-aids over it. So we put contact cement, we paint it on strips of ribbon, any kind of ribbon you want, or fabric. Then we cut them into little tabs, and then we contact cement the bottom and top of the seams, and then put a little band over it so that there's a little piece of fabric covering a little more surface area than just the two edges themselves glued together. So our fish is sticking better by the second. So now let's put the long passes together. Oh, that one just needs to sit longer. He refuses. So I'm going to match the top and bottom first. And then I've got a little notch. I'm going to match my little notch. And then I have a little bit of ease. So instead of just working from one side and pushing a bubble to the other side, I'm going to get kind of my two extremes hooked together. And then I'm going to find a spot in the middle and hook the spot in the middle together. And then the rest of it is just going to ease into place. And that one dart just needs a little more time. You can also, if you have a piece that's coming undone, just open it up, paint some more glue in it, and leave it for a little while, and then it will be set to go. But look how cool that is, except that one dart. So now we have half of our fish shape, and you can see that the tail is already starting to want to curve. So once we put the other piece on it, it'll curve. So we've got our neck, our armhole, our piece for the legs, our little fish face. There you can see the curve of the tail like that. And it's exactly the same as our itty bitty one. So C2 here, where this wants to make kind of a point, it means that we could instead of having this one large dart, we probably need a small dart next to it to make the curve more of a curve. But if we put giant eyeballs and eyelashes on this fish, you know, it's not going to show. So does anybody have any questions? Like the main part of this is to show everybody how to make patterns in larger shapes. Just gluing together foam was a fun little bonus. I'll look at the camera. Any questions about the radial projection using the wheel?
Would you fix that big dart later or just leave it?
Yeah, no, we want this big dart to be stuck like glue. Like you can feel when a part of this is absolutely stuck. But if a part isn't absolutely stuck, so there's still wet glue in there. And part of it too is the glue painted in the darts doesn't dry as quick as the big long open edges because the breeze doesn't get to it. So if we let this sit for a few more minutes, maybe another 10 minutes, and then just pushed it back together, so every time I stick it, it's sticking better. Like you want to make sure that all your corners are absolutely stuck. And I would even say that before you would cover something like this, let it sit overnight and see if anything wants, because when you're bending the foam, it wants to separate. It always wants to lay in a flat sheet. So overnight, you might have something that pulls apart. Just paint a little more glue on each side, let it dry, and then stick it together. And getting glue on both sides is very important, and also letting it dry. I've read a bunch of stuff online where people are trying to work this out, and they just paint the glue on and then keep jamming it together over and over and over and over again. It'll never work unless you let the glue kind of set up and dry, and then you can join them together. Anything else? Yeah. Rachel's responding quick to a couple folks, and then
she means on the final pattern, would you put in a second dart so it's
yeah, this
also,
yeah,
the places that weren't perfect matches lengthwise, would you fix the pattern before enlarging?
Somebody asked if I would go back in and put a second dart here. I probably wouldn't for this fish one, because also remember that if we were making this for a grown man or a person, not this tiny, the bigger it is, the more this little bump will soften out. But if you felt like you wanted a second dart in this, you would go back to your latex piece and cut a second dart in the latex. Do I even have it over here? If I thought I wanted a second dart in that, if I thought I wanted a second big dart, I would come in here, split my next dart, and lay it out. So what will happen is this giant dart will close some, and the new dart will open some, and that'll soften out that curve. As far as the long pieces that needed a little bit of ease, as long as it sticks together, I wouldn't go back and change it. But what you could do before you get to the foam is you can take your giant paper pattern pieces. So you can take your two big paper pattern pieces, and we call it walking together. So you would take, and I've got my my notch for M in my dart. You could walk the paper pattern pieces together and find out which one is a little bit long. And it looks like my overtail in this size is like 3/8 of an inch too long on this edge. So what I would do then is just in a couple spots, take out a smidge of length from that edge until it matches, right? So I've shrunk that edge. I haven't shrunk this back edge because then I would also measure this piece to the other side. Remember, we did just the left side. I would measure the back of his tail, this length, to the piece that matches to it and see how they are. If this piece is too long underneath and at the back, then you want to just take out evenly across it. So I think that addressed that question.
You covered it like how would you finish the opening?
When we cover this stuff with Lycra, we cut, we use more of the contact cement. So if we were covering this manatee with Lycra, give yourself an extra 2 inches of Lycra of seam allowance. So give yourself extra Lycra. Then after this is all glued together, we lay the Lycra on it, and we just take pins and we pin pretty frequently all the way through it. So we pin through the Lycra so that it's looking nice. Then we paint contact cement on the inside, and then we paint contact cement carefully on the flap of the Lycra. Cover up what you're not painting it on, because if you drop the contact cement down here, you're going to ruin it. You can't clean it off ever. It makes me think of the elevator. You can't clean the contact cement off. let them both dry. Then if you need, you'll know right away if you need to put some clips into your Lycra so that it will bend over and stick nicely to the inside. Then, you know how earlier I said sometimes you want a little tape Band-Aid? If an edge is getting covered with fabric on the inside or on the outside and glued to the inside, that kind of counts as your Band-Aid over the seam. So just know that areas that are going to get stressed out a lot, if you put a little Band-Aid is nice. Like you can even put the little fabric Band-Aids over seams in the middle. We did some great big champagne bottles that giant men wore, and where their shoulders were, we put little reinforcement strips where we contact cement over the seam and then take fabric or trim and contact cement that, let them both dry, and then just put a little reinforcement to help hold it together. So not with tape, but with ribbon and contact cement. And if something's going to get a ton of wear, you can put those little security bands anywhere you want. I think that's it. I'll send you guys a couple pictures with the link of some other stuff that we've done in foam just to spark your creativity. And you should be able to pattern anything that you can think of now in foam, in any size.
Bye.
Bye. Happy Australia Day.